A Nazi prison cell, 1943. A brilliant theologian watches his country descend into madness, and he realizes something terrifying. It's not evil that's destroying Germany, it's something far more dangerous. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, just months before his execution, wrote words that still haunt us today. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Think about that, not wickedness, not cruelty, stupidity. More dangerous than evil. But Bonhoeffer wasn't talking about intelligence. He wasn't measuring IQ. He discovered something about human nature that explains why entire nations follow tyrants, why good people defend terrible things, and why you cannot argue someone out of stupidity no matter how hard you try. What he uncovered in that prison cell might be the most important psychological insight of the 20th century. And it's happening again, right now, all around you. The prison revelation. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was not an ordinary prisoner. He was a pastor, a theologian, a man who had studied at the finest universities in Europe. He could have stayed safe in America when the war began. Instead, he returned to Germany. He joined the resistance. He plotted to assassinate Hitler, and when they caught him, they threw him into Tegel prison in Berlin. But something strange happened in that cell. Bonhoeffer had time to think, to observe, to question everything he thought he knew about human nature. He had watched educated, cultured, sophisticated Germans, doctors, lawyers, professors, embrace the Nazi ideology. Upon closer observation, it becomes apparent that every strong upsurge of power in the public sphere, be it of a political or religious nature, infects a large part of humankind with stupidity. This wasn't about education. This wasn't about intelligence. Something else was happening, something that turned otherwise capable people into willing servants of evil. Bonhoeffer called it a sociological problem, not a psychological one. And that distinction changes everything about how we understand human behavior, not lack of intellect. Here's where Bonhoeffer's insight gets uncomfortable. He wasn't talking about people who can't think. He was talking about people who won't think. Willful, that's the key word. Bonhoeffer observed something crucial. Highly intelligent people were often more susceptible to this kind of stupidity than simple, uneducated farmers. Why? Because intelligence can be weaponized against itself. A smart person can construct elaborate justifications for believing lies. They can use their intellect to defend the indefensible. Smart people, dumb choices. Bonhoeffer wrote that when you talk to someone infected with this stupidity, you quickly realize you're not dealing with a thinking problem. You're dealing with a power problem. Arguments bounce off. Facts don't penetrate. Logic becomes irrelevant. The person hasn't lost their ability to reason, they've surrendered it. They've given their thinking over to an external power, a movement, an authority. If this insight is opening your eyes to something you've sensed but couldn't name, hit like and subscribe for more biblical wisdom that reveals hidden truths. Because what comes next explains why this happens. The power transfer. Bonhoeffer discovered that stupidity is not a defect. It's a choice, but not a conscious one. Here's how it works. When a person encounters a rising power, a movement, a leader, an ideology, something psychological happens. They face a decision, usually unconscious, resist or submit. Most people submit, not because they're weak, not because they're evil, but because submission feels like belonging. The individual transfers their internal authority to an external source. They stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "Does my group believe this?" The person becomes an instrument of the collective will. Bonhoeffer saw this everywhere in Nazi Germany. Good people, church-going, family-loving, morally upright people doing monstrous things, or worse, looking away while monstrous things were done. They hadn't become evil. They had become stupid. Their capacity for independent moral judgment had been hijacked by a power greater than themselves. And here's the terrifying part. They felt righteous doing it. Why facts don't work. Have you ever tried to argue with someone who has surrendered their thinking? You present facts, they dismiss them. You show evidence, they explain it away. You appeal to logic, they call you the enemy. Every argument makes them more certain they're right. Bonhoeffer understood why. When stupidity takes hold, the person no longer evaluates ideas based on truth. They evaluate them based on loyalty. Your facts aren't just wrong to them, they're threatening. They're attacks on the group, on the leader, on their identity. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. This is why political arguments rarely change minds. This is why family dinners become battlegrounds. This is why social media feels like shouting into a void. You cannot argue someone out of a position they didn't argue themselves into. Logic can't defeat loyalty. The stupid person isn't convinced by evidence because they're not operating on an evidential level anymore. They're operating on a tribal level, and tribes don't care about truth. They care about survival, the inner liberation. So what's the solution? If you can't argue someone out of stupidity, what hope is there? Bonhoeffer's answer might surprise you. He said the only cure is liberation, but not external liberation. Internal. The stupid person must experience an inner liberation that allows them to reclaim their capacity for independent thinking. But here's the painful truth. This almost never happens while they're still under the power's influence. The spell must be broken before the mind can be freed. Usually it takes the power falling, the movement collapsing, the leader being exposed. Only when the external authority crumbles does the internal authority have a chance to rebuild. Bonhoeffer saw this happen after the war. Germans who had enthusiastically supported Hitler suddenly woke up and couldn't believe what they had done. They weren't lying. They genuinely didn't understand how they had become what they became. The word of the Bible that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. When human powers are dethroned, divine wisdom can enter. But this raises an uncomfortable question. Are you infected? Here's the question Bonhoeffer would ask you today. Not are they stupid? That's easy to see. But are you? The infected never know they're infected. Think about it. Every movement, every ideology, every political tribe believes they're the enlightened ones. They're the ones seeing clearly. It's always the other side that's been brainwashed. But Bonhoeffer's insight cuts both ways. If stupidity is surrendering your independent thinking to an external power, what external power might have your thinking? Is there a leader you would defend no matter what they did? Is there a group whose beliefs you've adopted without examination? Is there an ideology that determines what you're allowed to think before you think it? Question your own certainty. The most dangerous form of stupidity is the kind that feels like wisdom, the kind that makes you certain you're right, the kind that makes questioning feel like betrayal. If you've never questioned the powers you've submitted to, Bonhoeffer would say you haven't begun to think at all. The biblical parallel. Bonhoeffer wasn't just a philosopher, he was a pastor. And he saw this pattern throughout Scripture. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. The Bible is full of stories about collective stupidity. The golden calf, the demand for a king like other nations. The crowds shouting, "Crucify him," about a man they'd welcomed with palm branches days before. The crowd turned against the truth they had celebrated. What changed? The power structure. The priests said one thing, the Romans said another. The crowd followed the power. They always do. This is why Jesus constantly called people to individual accountability. You will give account, not your group, not your nation, not your political party. You, the fear of the Lord, that reverence for divine authority above all human authority, is what breaks the spell of earthly powers. It's why genuine Christians have historically been the most dangerous people to tyrants. They answer to a higher throne. Bonhoeffer's sacrifice. Dietrich Bonhoeffer never saw the end of the war. On April 9, 1945, just 2 weeks before Hitler's bunker fell, the Nazis executed him at Flossenburg concentration camp. He was 39 years old, martyred, but his words survived. His insights reached us, and they're more relevant now than ever. Bonhoeffer didn't just write about stupidity, he resisted it at the cost of everything. While millions of Germans surrendered their thinking to the Reich, Bonhoeffer surrendered his life to stop it. Some truths are worth dying for. The doctor who witnessed his final moments reported that Bonhoeffer knelt in prayer, then walked to the gallows with complete composure. He had not been made stupid by any earthly power. His mind belonged to God alone. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. That kind of inner freedom cannot be manufactured. It can only be received from a power greater than any human movement. And that brings us to the question that matters most, the antidote. So what protects us from stupidity? Bonhoeffer gave us the answer, though many miss it. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, not intelligence, not education, not critical thinking skills. The fear of God. Why? Because when you genuinely fear God, when you recognize an authority above every human authority, no earthly power can capture your thinking. You can listen to leaders without worshiping them. You can belong to movements without surrendering to them. You can love your country without making it your God. Higher allegiance breaks lesser chains. This is why the most resistant people in Nazi Germany were often devout Christians and Jews. Their primary allegiance was elsewhere. Their thinking was anchored to something immovable. They could see the madness because they served a different king. The antidote to collective stupidity is not smarter individuals. It's individuals submitted to a wisdom beyond human wisdom. And that submission, paradoxically, is what makes you free. Your choice today. Bonhoeffer wrote these words in a Nazi prison, facing certain death. But he wasn't writing about his generation. He was writing about every generation, including yours. The same forces that captured 1930s Germany are active right now. Rising powers, charismatic leaders, movements that demand total loyalty, ideologies that tell you what to think before you think it. The question is not whether these forces exist. The question is whether you'll recognize them, whether you'll resist them, whether you'll maintain the inner freedom that no external power can steal. Think for yourself. Bonhoeffer paid for his freedom with his life. You probably won't have to, but you will have to choose every day whose authority your mind belongs to. The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves to its children. What world are you building with your thinking? What powers have you surrendered to without knowing it? The answer to those questions might be the most important thing you ever discover. Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw something in that prison cell that most people never see. He saw that the greatest threat to humanity isn't the monsters. It's the masses who enable them. Not through malice, through stupidity. Through surrendering their God-given capacity for independent thought to powers that don't deserve it. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. But here's the hope Bonhoeffer offered. This surrender is not permanent. The mind can be reclaimed. The spell can be broken. The inner liberation is possible for anyone who seeks wisdom from above rather than permission from below. Reclaim your mind today. If you made it this far, comment inner liberation if Bonhoeffer's insight changed how you see the world around you. Stay in the Word, stay in the Spirit, and watch what God does. If this opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more teachings that challenge and transform. See you in the next one.